Elon Musk has decided to comment about English politics because the situation in England right now is so bad that people just cannot ignore it. It is just so bad and so dystopian. And we have both the Labour government and the mainstream media who are basically circulating their narrative that they're literally trying to tell us to disbelieve our own eyes. They tell us, for instance, that there's no two-tier policing, that somehow all this is just and humane. And basically we have a society where we have gangs of people with bikes and machetes and stuff going out, and a whole establishment that is basically saying that was in self-defense. That's a huge problem. And Elon Musk started talking about it. He went after Keir Starmer. And this exchange is also a bit funny. It's bittersweet because it's a bit funny in some cases, but it's also bittersweet because the reality is horrible.
Well, the good thing is that Elon Musk is the world's largest platform, exempting maybe Donald Trump, if Trump got back on X. And he is now cementing the narrative that Keir Starmer is applying the law in a naked and preferential and partisan faction in the discourse. Keir Starmer cannot shake the nickname two-tier Keir now that Elon Musk has used it. And he waded into, which you were covering diligently at the time, the Parnell Square protests in Ireland, and put on steroids the Irish nationalist narrative that our government is oppressing us. We didn't consent to mass immigration. They're trying to censor us, and they're trying to change the constitution to make us less like Ireland. And that toppled the Taoiseach. Immigration still doesn't stop. There's still a way to go, but Elon Musk really helped in that situation. So we're glad he's helping now.
So we have this summary from X here that is a bit funny because it says Elon Musk has publicly criticized Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, on social media, accusing him of creating a two-tier society and questioning his policies. I think that the two-tier society has been going along for some time, and we have been saying so, but because essentially it's wokeness. And the Tory government was trying to outwoke the woke, but Keir Starmer came back and says, I'm the wokest of the woke. And we have here, this has sparked a wide range of reactions, with some users expressing support for Musk's stance and others criticizing it as trolling or an attempt to gain popularity.
Elon Musk lacking popularity.
Yes. The next thing we're going to be told is that he lacks money.
Yeah, exactly. It's so absurd.
Right. So here we have Elon Musk talking about a clip from Andy No. He's tagging Keir Starmer, and he says, why aren't all communities protected in Britain? And he also replies with a hashtag two-tier Keir. And this had this thing had 5.7 million views, and essentially it got trending. Now, what is interesting here is that one of the most blatant, one of the most evident evidence for one of the most evident examples of the two-tier policing and the two-tier society and the two-tier rhetoric is the reaction is that Keir Starmer had with the BLM riots, and the reaction that he has now. And if you remember, when the BLM riots were ongoing, there were people who were saying, on the one hand, we should only chant Black Lives Matter, and other people were saying, no, we should chant All Lives Matter, and that should be the principle of legislation.
Racist.
That was very racist. And apparently, Elon Musk is very racist because he's asking, why aren't all communities protected? And Keir Starmer did the unthinkable. As far as law enforcement is concerned, the last thing that a statesman should do is take sides in advance between rival communities.
Well, I think I can briefly explain why he doesn't want to protect these communities. It's because they see Britain as a propositional nation rather than an old world nation. So they think Britain is a set of values you consent to, and they set themselves as the only people that can define those values. This is why the chap last night said that the English do not exist, because we don't do it this way anymore, because we've had newcomers. So we've redefined what English means. And so they see the far right as not English because they don't assent to multicultural, liberal, secular British values. But they somehow think that the Muslims do, because they think that they can just give them enough youth clubs and even the most ardent jihadian will fold into the melting pot. And so they're trying to define the far right out of existence.
Well, I think there's a part of this as well, which is to do with international legalisms, which is that if you are a particular ethnic group that can be claimed to be indigenous, then you actually have rights under the UN. There's the UN Indigenous Rights Act, or whatever it's called, that gives you particular rights specifically against some kind of ethnic or cultural genocide. And if you go back to 2009, there was a parliamentary debate on whether there is any sort of legitimacy to the idea that there is a native British, and they outright denied it and denied the English and the British any sort of indigenous status, yes. And I think that that's part of the reason why, is that the people in charge don't want us to have rights.
Yes.
We have here Elon Musk quote tweeting Kevin Sorbo, who is talking about the sentences that some people have had. And you will see also Elon Musk is using the platform to talk about the grooming gangs that isn't talked as much as it should be talked. I don't know if it is even discussed in mainstream media.
The last time it got proper coverage was GB News, because Charlie Peter's excellent documentary on it, and that was about 1.5 years ago. Samantha Smith, who was one of the victims of the Telford grooming gangs, did an interview on GB News a while ago. She attached this to Elon Musk's tweet, and it got millions of views, but most people don't want to admit it because it indicts the establishment for importing a community of people with ethnic and cultural hostilities that all covered up for one another. Because as Carl's used the example before, if any of you lads knew someone who said, oh, I've got this underage girl tied up at my apartment, do you want to come and have a go? We would not only call the police, we'd kick the crap out of him to ensure the girl was safe. I don't know anyone that I could call up and say, they go, yeah, I'll do that. But they knew a lot of people that would do that. The whole community did. So it indicts the whole community.
The whole community knew that it was happening. All of the testimony that you read regarding all of this is that, the whole community knew, the mothers of these people knew, and they thought that it was appropriate because these people were, what's the term that they use for basically religious outsiders?
Oh, kafir.
Kafir, yes.
Kafar, sorry.
Yeah.
Elon, plural.
Yes.
There's one thing I'm curious about. Elon Musk's promoting all of this, and I know that people consider Elon Musk to be a globalist, and obviously he does want to reach Mars and all sorts. But on Twitter recently, I'm sure he responded to somebody mentioning that he was South African, assuming that he was ancestrally Dutch. And he said that he's actually ancestrally British, English. So I wonder if this is just a part of him seeing what is essentially his homeland going to absolute pot, and there's a bit, something in his blood is telling him
ancestral memory.
Ancestral memory is telling him I need to speak about this.
Yes.
The Saxon has learned to hate Elon Musk.
So he is quote tweeting Keir Starmer again, and he's asking, is this still happening? And he's also using community notes to use Twitter and show that Twitter has a lot of mechanisms in connection. Now, community notes, generally speaking, is good.
Yes.
I've seen some really bad community notes.
But you can downvote them if they're inaccurate.
Yeah, but you can. And I think generally speaking, it functions really well.
Yes.
And he's showing here the respective sentences that some people have had. And they say here, left guy Sean Tuck, jailed for 15 weeks after posting racist abuse online. Middle guy, Sam Melia, jailed after a series of stickering incidents. And right guy, and he had 24 months in prison. And the person on the right, Hamoud Al-Soaimi, jailed for 2 years, suspended for 2 years, with 180 hours unpaid work.
That's the only unpaid work or paid work he's ever done in his life.
That's the only work he's ever done, I assume.
Who repeatedly raped a 12-year-old girl. That was the sentence. So this is just obviously something that shows that these sentences weren't particularly well considered.
They weren't fair.
Yeah, so not only Keir Starmer, but also the mainstream media are being targeted by Elon Musk. Here we have Leo Kurz, who is talking.
Good lad.
Who is basically quote tweeting Elon and says he's doing a good job of holding the government to account. And he's doing a better job than the entirety of UK media. And Elon Musk responds to him, why does the UK media, with a few exceptions, just parrot the government? And basically he's telling them that without a written constitution, UK media companies are vulnerable to state prescription censorship by Ofcom, the state regulator for broadcasters.
So Ofcom mandates that you can and can't cover certain topics, and you always have to have some left-wing midwit on your panel at all times to provide balance. So it creates jobs for their friends.
Exactly. So what he is doing, he is basically shattering the multiculturalist illusion of the Labour government. And I will say this because it's particularly important, because it is directly relevant to all the unfortunate cases that we have been discussing, is that multiculturalism is not a push for integrationism. Multiculturalism is the exact opposite. It says, no, people shouldn't assimilate, people shouldn't integrate, people should practice their different cultures. So this multiculturalist creed literally says that for individuals to be respected, their cultures have to be respected as well. And when people are recreating multiculturalist tropes in a very abstract sense, they never pause to think whether the cultures that we're talking about are compatible or not with the host culture. And I think that especially when we're talking about the grooming gangs, when we're talking about these very tragic cases, and the people who were complicit into it, or the people who were silent about it, or because they thought that, well, that's how it's been going on here, that's part of the culture that seems to be a bit incompatible with Western culture.
And that's putting it politely.
So, yeah, I want to be polite because I'm a polite person. So we had a lot of criticism, a lot of interesting points that were being made. And again, that's a polite claim. We have Piers Morgan here, who does the unthinkable. He basically accuses Elon Musk for one-sidedness, as if we don't have enough one-sidedness from the mainstream media.
Yeah, but the thing is, Piers Morgan will pretend to have had our opinion in about 6 months' time and to have always had that opinion, just like he did when he was supporting mandatory vaccinations, just like he did when he was supporting lockdown, despite him going out of the country and going on holiday and supporting his son going to BLM marches. The man is a hypocrite with zero wrinkles in his brain.
Glad you've got our back, Piers. 6 months from now.
We have Aaron Bastani here, who is basically making a series of claims about X. And Aaron Bastani and a lot of other leftists are creating a narrative that essentially leads down to calls to censor X, either entirely or temporarily. But I will criticize them because if you really think about it, in principle, what they're saying applies to all kinds of communication, even telecommunication. So they are going to use this argument also. They can, it's entirely upon their hand to say that, well, we should stop telecommunications because we could also, people who phone each other can spread disinformation.
Well, if people have other people to talk to or other sources of media to consult, who's going to watch Novara Media unless they're being forced to?
Yeah, but who wants freedom of assembly when you want basically absolute power to promote your woke multiculturalist agenda? It's a threat. People assembling and possibly representing a united front against you that guards against the potential for the abuse of power on your part. Yeah, that's not something you want if you go after absolute power. So he also says, this man has clearly lost his mind. The government needs to relearn the majesty of the state. Understand that they're invested with extraordinary democratic power.
Sorry, is Aaron Bastani a monarchist or
average communist? About the majesty of the state.
And put oiks like this in the place. Musk is cheering on a civil war in our country. This is not a joke.
He's predicting it.
Now, let me say one thing. I think that this is unacceptable coming from Aaron Bastani because he is actually doing what I've seen in a lot of classes in universities doing. He is playing the woke card of students, first year undergraduates who think they're smart and they're actually stupid. And they're basically, what they're doing is they're interpreting everything in the worst possible way. And the disaster we're living right now is precisely what this has led to. People who rush to say that any kind of warning is a threat. It's not a threat if you're saying that what you're doing is unsustainable. It's not a threat.
Let the man cook.
Yeah, so when civil war says civil war is inevitable, when Elon Musk says this, he's not cheering. He's not cheering at all. He's warning that you ideologues need to wake up, listen to the people. You don't know better. You are supposed to serve the people. The people are not supposed to serve you. Now, we have here Rory Stewart. He is asking Elon Musk Elon Musk is asking Keir Starmer, shouldn't you be concerned about attack on all communities? And he says, seriously, since when have you claimed to understand British communities or British politics? Exactly how many days have you spent with these communities? Does it ever occur to you that this might perhaps be the wrong time to sound off about a subject you know nothing about?
Screenshot this, and anytime Rory Stewart puts out a tweet about anything, just reply with it, because Rory Stewart is a towering, thundering midwit who misjudged the room so profoundly he got kicked out of the Conservative Party while trying to run a leadership campaign, and has spent the last few years counter-signalling any return to right-wing policy to the extent where he said he might vote Green.
Well, did he vote Green or Lib Dem in the last election?
He said his hands hovering over Labour, and then recently said, I'm ready to work for a Labour government. So he's just grifting his way into a job for the uniparty consensus.
Well, so he claims to understand British communities and British politics, but has he actually understood a lot of the grievances of the English community?
I don't think so, because he co-hosts a podcast with Alistair Campbell, whose lies and dirty dossier got us involved in the Iraq War. So I don't think Rory Stewart's particularly in touch with how the British feel.
Let's go to the next censorious person. Let me say, Paul Mason, he says, HMG needs to enact the full Online Safety Act now. No more consultations. They should call the two executives of UK Twitter in to explain why the CEO is personally boosting hate speech, incitement, and disinformation, and pull the plug on the service unless this stops. I'd be happy to lose this service and see Telegram blocked as well if it avoids a serious breakdown of the rule of law this weekend.
Bear in mind, in 2011, he wrote a book saying that riots are good.
Yeah, and also, Connor, I want to ask you something, because I know you're really switched on.
Wait, did he actually? Sorry.
Yes.
I know both of you are really switched on this. He's talking about, this was posted in August 6. Was it by then, was there another figure from the left-wing circles who had circulated disinformation and endangered...
Well, which one?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, the hideous communist goblin that is Nick Lowles.
And endangered people's lives. And Paul Mason doesn't seem to be particularly asking for Nick Lowles to be asked about.
Well, Stelios, when they do it, it's malicious misinformation. When we do it, it's an honest mistake.
Yeah, so Jessica Seymour here is essentially saying X needs to be closed down. And
switch X off then. Put your phone down.
Yes.
Step outside and touch grass.
And she quote tweets as if, there is no debate to be had about it. There is no argument. She basically quote tweets Elon Musk's tweet, why aren't all communities protected in Britain, who is also quote tweeting Andy Ngo's
video evidence
that exactly what he says is exactly what happens there. No, we can't have people believing in their own eyes. In order to report things, you need to have a sort of, you need degrees, you need 20 years of accreditation. Because
you need the mandate of heaven.
Yeah, without these, you can't talk about facts, and you cannot even show them, because people might get the wrong impression.
And that's incredible, though. All he's asking is a very simple question, which everybody can see is a very pertinent one. It's very relevant. Yeah, these communities are policed differently. Her response to that is not to even try to come up with an answer. It's shut it down. That's the only response.
Here we have another member. I think it's a knight, Sir Tom Windsor. So Sir Tom says, losing both their fortunes and their liberty concentrates their mind like nothing else at all. Sir Tom Windsor reiterates his call for criminal liability for social managers of social media companies if their platform is not policing harmful content.
Curious he wasn't doing this for the decades that child sexual exploitation material was running rife on Meta and Twitter. That would have been a perfectly fine thing to hold their feet to the fire over. But no, now that people are noticing patterns about armed Muslim militias roaming around, the government doesn't want to police. Now Elon Musk should be held accountable.
Well, if we know anything about the communities that are being criticised in all of this, well, it suggests that maybe the child sexual exploitation isn't so much of a priority, isn't so much of a concern with these people.
It certainly wasn't for the police covering up the grooming gangs, you're right.
And there's another thing I found here, because I must say, I must confess, I really like some legalisms. They keep the mind sharp. So he's talking about criminal liability. Has there been any case here? Has there been any court that has, any judge that has decided this individual here and this individual there, who are the CEOs of social media companies, are actually guilty in the eyes of law and therefore have criminal liability?
No, magically not.
Magically not.
As far as I'm aware, the most that they could do is if they really extended, as Paul Mason was suggesting to do, the Ofcom's authority using the online safety bill, is that they would be subject to regulations that they could then be fined for. But that's still not criminal liability.
Is it not perfect when the people who are talking about how the system and progress should be upheld and how progress should continue, and how the West should survive against those far-right thugs, are essentially disrespecting the basic institution of the West, that is the presumption of innocence? And you can't talk about people in these terms without them having been convicted in a court of law. Just one question for that. There's another interesting tweet that Carl has responded by Zara Sultana, who writes, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The enemy of the working class travels by private jet, not migrant dinghy.
Quick thing as well. She's currently suspended from the Labour Party for voting against Keir Starmer, so the fact that she still has Labour MP in her bio is factually inaccurate.
But also it shows how strong grip progressivism has in her party. And that's why she wants to play the card.
Well, what if the man travelling by private jet gains by having the man in migrant dinghy come over?
What if he runs Serco, for example?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, it's not just progressivism. I think this is important. I'm not disagreeing with you, Stelios. Progressivism has taken root in the Labour Party so that they allow MPs like Zara Sultana to be in it. But Zara Sultana is not making a principled stance about liberal universalism when she's talking about progressivism. Neither was Humza Yousaf making a really nuanced point when he decried all of Scotland for being white. They just have anti-white race hatred, and everything else is window dressing.
Exactly.
So that needs to be pointed out.
So it's the rhetoric of the two-tier system.
It's Radio Rwanda.
Yeah. And Carl has a brilliant response. The enemy of the working class systematically rapes his daughters and beats his son while being covered for by the police and politicians. And I want to end with this very chilling claim. And I want to say, look at the very sensitive way she is talking about it, where she's just trying to show us that she cares about the emotions of the audience and she doesn't want to upset anyone's emotions and all these, sensitivity nonsense. Look at what she is actually saying.
Need to click it again.
I think so. I think we should stop it. It's only a temporary measure in order to limit the spread of inflammatory information, misinformation as well, across the United Kingdom at this point. And I think we should focus on keeping people safe and communities safe as well. So my point is just to
So essentially, she calls for the banning of Twitter.
Only a temporary measure is what we said at the start of the lockdowns that were 2 years.
There's nothing more permanent than temporary government measures. But what is really interesting here to note is that the same argument can be used for telecommunications. The same argument can be used for freedom of assembly. But what is different here is that essentially they really are authoritarians. They really are after people's liberties. And they have worked for decades how they're going to present this. I find this unbelievably chilling. People should call it out. That's the destruction of the West. It's not progress, that's regress.
And Elon Musk needs to keep hammering on this because we are now relying on him as an ally to keep the free movement of information around the UK, because the government are just denying that there are Muslim gangs patrolling around the country for white people, and that's a real thing that's happening.
Exactly. And one key difference is that anyone who posts on X, they have their posts there for the people to see. There are community notes. Nothing of the sort occurs in any other platform. Or in any not in any other platform, but when it comes to telecommunications or freedom of assembly, they're not public. And what I want to say is that X and these platforms, they're good for people to know, because I'm pro free speech. Okay, I'm not a free speech absolutist, but I'm pro free speech because I want people to know what people are saying, even if it's hideous. I want people to be able to point out and say, Destiny, for instance, said this absolutely hideous thing. You need to be prepared. You need to be vigilant. There are people out there like Destiny who is saying absolutely hideous thing.
While sat on the corner.
Exactly.
In the hotel room.
This is habituating people into actually being concerned citizens. And that is what they're having, because wokeness is all about destroying civil society, demonizing civil society, and creating a vast state without sufficient checks to its powers.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see what else we're doing, you can follow Dan's series, Brokenomics, where he talks about broken systems. And if you want to see all the other work that we're putting out and you don't want to miss anything, you can follow us on Twitter. And we always post links to all of the work we're putting out so you don't miss a single thing. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.